Mickey Mouse was his favorite cartoon. I can't even bring myself to watch Mickey Mouse.
I'd do anything to have him back. I really would.
That picture right there, that's the one that I'm missing bad, Your Honor.
If every child deserves to grow up safe, loved, and protected, then the story of Stephen Dale Meek 2 is one that demands attention. This is not fiction. It is not a dramatized television crime story. It is a real event involving a real child, a real father, and a loss that time has never been able to soften. What happened to this little boy is heartbreaking, but it is also important. Because cases like this reveal something deeply troubling. Sometimes the systems designed to protect children never realize a child is in danger until it is far too late. Understanding how that happens can be the difference between tragedy repeating itself and someone recognizing the warning signs in time. To understand this story, it begins with a moment that once held nothing but hope. July 14, 2016, Montgomery County, Virginia. On that summer day, a young man named Stephen Meek became a father for the first time. He named his son Stephen Dale Meek 2. For many parents, the moment they first hold their child is almost impossible to describe. It is a mixture of disbelief, responsibility, and a kind of overwhelming love that arrives instantly. Stephen stood quietly in the hospital room looking down at his newborn son. Tiny hands, a small, warm body wrapped in a blanket, eyes that could barely focus yet, already searching the world around them. For him, the meaning of that moment was immediate and clear. Nothing in his life would ever matter more than the child in his arms. Little Stephen grew up in Christiansburg, Virginia, a small and quiet town in Montgomery County. It was the kind of place where people recognized each other in the grocery store, where neighbors waved from across the street, and where children spent evenings playing outside until the sun disappeared behind the hills. From the very beginning, Stephen had the kind of personality that people noticed right away. He was full of energy and curiosity, always moving, always exploring. His laugh came suddenly and brightly, the kind of laugh that made other people smile without even realizing it. Friends and family remembered the same thing about him. He had a way of filling a room with life. Like many small children, Stephen developed strong attachments to the things he loved most. One of those things was a small Mickey Mouse stuffed toy. That toy went everywhere with him. On walks around the neighborhood, on trips to the store, and every night when he went to sleep. At one point, his father jokingly hid the toy for a moment just to see how Stephen would react. The reaction came immediately: confusion, then distress. Within a few minutes, the toy was back in his arms. Some things simply matter too much to take away from a child. Stephen also loved picture books, but he approached them in his own careful way. Before anyone could read the story to him, he would examine each page first, studying every image closely. His small finger would tap the pictures one by one, almost as if he were asking silent questions about everything he saw. Only after finishing his inspection would he look up at the adult nearby, waiting for the explanation that turned the pictures into a story. When someone finally started reading, he became completely still. For a 2-year-old, the focus was remarkable. His father read to him every night before bed. It became a quiet routine, simple, predictable, and deeply meaningful. Those bedtime moments belonged only to the two of them. Father and son quickly formed a bond that defined Stephen's early life. They went on walks together to the park. They watched cartoons on weekend mornings, often with the Mickey Mouse toy sitting beside them on the couch like a third viewer. Sometimes Stephen would stop beside a puddle on the sidewalk and stare at his own reflection in the water, as if he were trying to understand something about the world. They were small moments, ordinary moments, the kind of everyday memories that seem insignificant at the time. But later, they would become the memories that mattered the most. Stephen Meek Sr. saved every photo he took of his son. There were dozens of them, small, everyday moments captured on his phone. Stephen playing in the park, Stephen flipping through picture books, Stephen holding his Mickey Mouse toy like it was the most important thing in the world. At night, after work, Stephen Sr. would sometimes scroll through those photos. He would pause on certain ones longer than others, imagining the future that lay ahead for the little boy in those pictures, the man his son might become one day. In the family, everyone had a nickname for him. They called him Lil Bit. His grandfather on his mother's side adored him. Whenever he had free time, he spent it with his grandson. To the people around him, little Stephen had a natural ability to lift the mood of a room without even trying. He didn't need to do anything special. Just being there was enough. But Stephen's parents, Stephen Meek Sr. and Kayla Thomas, were no longer together. They had separated, and like many parents in that situation, they arranged shared custody. Stephen split his time between his mother's home and his father's. For a while, that system worked. Despite the separation, the child still had a circle of people who loved him and looked out for him. Between his father, his mother, and extended family members, Stephen had a world that felt stable. He was safe. He was cared for. Until gradually that world began to change. Sometime in 2018, a man named Mackenzie Hellman entered Kayla Thomas's life. Hellman was 25 years old. Not long after the relationship began, he moved into Kayla's home at 430 Zinc Lane in Christiansburg, Virginia, a small mobile home on a quiet street only a few minutes away from the local police station. Hellman also had a young son from a previous relationship. From that point forward, the two toddlers, Hellman's son and little Stephen, sometimes shared the same home. From the outside, nothing appeared unusual. A young mother in a new relationship, a new adult living in the house. Situations like that happen in neighborhoods everywhere. Neighbors didn't report loud arguments or disturbances. No one called police about the home. In fact, people who lived nearby barely noticed anything at all. One neighbor who lived directly behind the house would later tell reporters that he had no idea a child even lived there. Stephen simply wasn't seen outside very often. But at the time, no one interpreted that as a warning sign. On paper, the custody arrangement between Kayla Thomas and Stephen Meek Sr. still existed. But over time, the reality of that arrangement began to shift. Stephen was going back to his father's house less and less frequently. Instead, he was spending more time at the mobile home on Zinc Lane, with Kayla and with Mackenzie Hellman. Stephen Sr. checked in regularly. He asked how his son was doing. Each time, the responses sounded normal enough on the surface, but something didn't feel right. Parents sometimes describe a quiet instinct when something about their child seems off, even when there are no obvious signs of danger. For Stephen Sr., that feeling slowly grew stronger. There are certain kinds of danger that leave obvious traces. Loud arguments, police calls, neighbors hearing something wrong. But there is another kind of danger that makes almost no noise at all. It stays hidden behind closed doors. It leaves nothing visible for outsiders to notice. And unless someone reports it, the systems meant to protect children may never even know it exists. In this case, that is exactly what happened. Later, Christiansburg police confirmed that there had been no prior reports involving either Mackenzie Hellman or Kayla Thomas. No calls from neighbors. No Child Protective Services referrals. No documented concerns. As far as the system was concerned, there was nothing to investigate. The household simply appeared ordinary. Meanwhile, small changes in Stephen began to appear. The energetic, curious toddler his father knew, the one who ran toward him with excitement whenever they saw each other, was becoming quieter, more withdrawn, more tense. The change did not happen suddenly. It unfolded slowly enough that even the people who loved him most struggled to pinpoint exactly when things began to feel different. Stephen Sr. would later describe those visits in painful detail. Seeing his son every other weekend, sitting on the floor playing with him, listening to him talk, trying to make the most of every moment together. But something about the boy had changed. The little child who once ran toward him with pure excitement now seemed guarded, almost as if he were bracing for something. At the time, Stephen Sr. didn't know what was happening inside the house on Zinc Lane. When investigators eventually uncovered the truth, even experienced law enforcement officers found themselves struggling to process it. The day everything collapsed began like any other. Kayla Thomas left home for her shift at Deli Mart on Roanoke Street. That meant Mackenzie Hellman was left at the house with the two young boys, his own toddler son and Stephen Meek too, who was around 2.5 years old. Hours passed. That evening, around 8:35 p.m., Hellman and Kayla began texting each other. Kayla asked how things were going at home. During the conversation, she mentioned something that, in hindsight, sounded troubling. She said that Stephen had been acting strange lately, that something about his behavior seemed different. At the time, no one stopped to treat that comment as a warning sign. Hellman sent a short response and the conversation moved on. At 9:05 p.m., Hellman called Kayla. 8 minutes later, at 9:13 p.m., he dialed 911. Officer Aaron Lusk of the Christiansburg Police Department was the first officer to arrive at the house. Inside the living room, he found Mackenzie Hellman sitting on the floor. Beside him was Stephen Meek too. The little boy was critically injured. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They worked on the child for 25 minutes, doing everything they could to stabilize him before transporting him to the hospital. Hellman immediately offered an explanation. According to him, the boys had been playing in the bedroom. He said he heard a loud noise. When he walked in, he claimed he found Stephen lying on the floor. The child must have fallen off the bed, he told officers. Investigators checked the bed. It was 13 inches off the ground. Stephen was rushed first to Lewis Gale Hospital, Montgomery, then airlifted to Carilion Roanoke Memorial Hospital in Roanoke, where doctors fought to save his life. Despite every effort by the medical team, the injuries were too severe. 2 days later, on January 13, 2019, at 7:40 p.m., Stephen Dale Meek II died. He was 2.5 years old. When his father received the call, everything in his world stopped. The little boy he had read to every night. The child he filmed during ordinary walks and quiet afternoons. The son he expected to watch grow up. Gone. And nothing could undo it. Detectives with the Christiansburg Police Department began working the case immediately. From the very beginning, something about Hellman's explanation didn't hold up. The claim that Stephen had died from falling off a bed quickly began to unravel. During the investigation, medical examiner Dr. Amy Tharp would later testify that the child's injuries were not consistent with a fall from that height. In court, she explained the conclusion in simple terms. If a fall from 13 inches could cause injuries like that, she said, none of us would have survived childhood. Investigators then examined the phones belonging to Mackenzie Hellman and Kayla Thomas. What they discovered on those devices shocked even experienced detectives. Messages, photos, videos. Piece by piece, the evidence revealed a disturbing pattern that went far beyond simple neglect. According to investigators, Hellman had gradually established complete control over the household, over Kayla, and over the child. The messages showed threats, manipulation, and escalating psychological pressure. During testimony, Kayla would later describe living in constant fear. Fear for herself, for the child, and for another baby she was carrying at the time. Under that pressure, she eventually participated in actions that prosecutors later argued crossed a line no parent should ever cross. Actions that would ultimately lead to serious criminal charges in the case. 3 days before Stephen died, on January 8, 2019, something happened inside the mobile home on Zinc Lane that investigators would later describe as one of the most disturbing elements of the entire case. According to evidence recovered from private messages on Mackenzie Hellman's phone, he pressured Kayla Thomas into participating in an act involving the child, an act prosecutors would later describe in court as deeply abusive and criminal. The messages showed that Hellman was not somewhere else when he sent them. He was inside the same mobile home, only rooms away. For investigators, the discovery revealed something devastating. By that point, little Stephen had already been failed by the two adults who were supposed to protect him most. And when Kayla left for work on January 11th, leaving Hellman alone in the house with the two children, The situation inside that home had already crossed a line from which there would be no recovery. After Stephen was rushed to the hospital, the investigation moved quickly. On January 13, 2019, the same day the child died from his injuries, Mackenzie Hellman was arrested. Prosecutors charged him with multiple serious felony offenses related to abuse and exploitation. 3 days later, on January 16th, Kayla Thomas was also arrested. At the time of her arrest, she was pregnant with Hellman's child. Both were held without bond as the case moved toward trial.
So this week's been a very tough week for the law enforcement members that have investigated this case, and also family members affected by, obviously this is a tragedy in our community. You know, a lot of things this week resonated with me. You know, as you look at this picture of this young man, you know, children in our community are absolutely, they're cherished. You know, they are individuals without voice. And many times in those situations, and situations like we've encountered this week, it's our job to be their voice. And we will absolutely be their voice, be this young man's voice throughout the continuation of this investigation through the prosecution. So I just feel like I needed to get that off of me. And again, it's been a tough week. I thank you guys for being here. I am Mark Sisson. I'm the police chief in Christiansburg. And I wish we were here in better circumstances, but I do appreciate you being here to share the story. It is with a sense of profound sadness that I stand before you today. As you're already aware, on Friday, January the 11th at approximately 9:15 p.m., the Christiansburg Police Department and Christiansburg Rescue responded to a call reporting an unresponsive child who had fallen at a residence at 430 Zinc Lane in the town of Christiansburg. The child, who we can now identify as Stephen Dale Meek II, age 2, ultimately died from the injuries he sustained. The incident resulted in a very detailed and thorough investigation of the events leading up to the death of Stephen Meek. We are now in a position to provide information about what we have discovered. Friday night, Officer Aaron Lust, the first responder to the call, arrived to find an adult male, Mackenzie Kyle Hellman, age 25, seated on the floor next to the unresponsive child, later identified as Stephen Meek. At the time of the incident, Hellman resided at the residence on Zinc Lane with Stephen and Stephen's mother, Kayla Thomas, also age 25. Hellman is Kayla Thomas's boyfriend and is not related to her son, Stephen. Kayla Thomas was at work at the time of the incident. Shortly after Officer Lust's arrival, members of the Christiansburg Rescue Squad arrived along with Officer Lust. They began to perform CPR and performed CPR for approximately 25 minutes before a pulse was detected. Stephen was transported by ambulance to Lewis Gale Montgomery Regional Hospital and then airlifted to Carilion Roanoke Memorial Hospital. While treating Stephen, medical professionals indicated, or including a forensics nurse, discovered bruising and injury that did not appear to be consistent with the preliminary statement that Tyler had fallen from a crib or a bed. A criminal investigation was initiated and our detectives worked around the clock, conducting interviews, executing search warrants, and collecting evidence. This investigation revealed evidence indicating that Stephen had been the victim of physical abuse, and as a result, on Sunday, January the 11th, Mackenzie Hellman was arrested and charged with 1 count of felony child abuse. Medical evaluation at Roanoke Memorial revealed minimal brain activity, and Stephen was placed on life support in a pediatric care unit. Tragically, at approximately 7:40 p.m. on Sunday, January the 13th, Stephen Meeks died. Our detectives continued with their investigation in the cause of Stephen's death and ultimately uncovered evidence indicating that Stephen was not only the victim of physical abuse that resulted in his injuries on January the 11th, but also that he had been the victim of sexual abuse at the hands of both Mackenzie Hellman and his mother, Kayla Thomas. Preliminary forensics evidence indicates that Stephen died as a result of extreme blunt force trauma to the head. The number and severity of injuries indicate that the injuries were not the result of one impact from a fall, as we were initially told by Mackenzie Hellman. Instead, the evidence indicates multiple injuries to the head and body area. Additionally, evidence uncovered during the investigation implement both Hellman and Kayla Thomas in the ongoing sexual abuse of this child. As a result of these findings, on Thursday, January the 17th, Mackenzie Hellman was charged, and also Kayla Thomas. And you have been provided those charges. I will not read through those. The one thing I will elaborate on quickly is the felony murder charge. There'll be a lot of questions about that. Felony murder described is when the victim accidentally dies during the commission of another felony. The other felony in this case is child abuse. With regards to this charge, the investigation is continuing, and it is likely that this charge will be upgraded as we work this case with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. At this time, both Hellman and Thomas are being held without bond at the Western Virginia Regional Jail. I would like to take a few minutes to recognize some extraordinary efforts of some people who have worked this case during the week. The first responder, Officer Lusk, and the members of the Christiansburg Rescue Squad who tirelessly performed CPR to try to save Stephen. The medical staff at both Lewis Gale Montgomery Regional Hospital and Korean Roanoke Memorial Hospital for their efforts in caring for Stephen. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office who provided assistance with the crime scene processing, and finally the entire criminal investigative unit here at the Christiansburg Police Department. Their professionalism, diligence, and training allowed them to conduct what was a very difficult investigation and to discover evidence necessary to bring the persons responsible for the abuse and ultimately the brutal death of Stephen Meeks to justice. I would also like to thank the Montgomery County Commonwealth Attorney's Office for their partnership as we move into the prosecution phase of this case. We are very fortunate in this community where violent crime is rare. The same good fortune makes it all the more shocking when events like this happen within our community. What happened to this innocent child can only be described as horrific, and we can only imagine the pain felt by the loved ones of Stephen Meeks, and our hearts and prayers go out to the families involved. While the initial phase of the investigation has concluded, this case is not over. With prosecution still pending, I will not comment on specific evidence found or statements made by individual parties. That said, at this time I'll ask if you have questions. I'll try to answer the ones that I can. My response will be very limited outside of what has been provided.
Have you all been in contact with the boy's biological father?
The boys, we have, yes.
Does he live in the area?
He does live in the area.
Were there any other victims that you know about involved in this case, in this situation, related to the charges that have been brought forth?
Yes.
Can you tell us how many?
Just one other.
A minor?
A minor, that we cannot provide that information due to the child being a minor and also our continued investigation to follow.
Do you know anything about the length of time that the sexual abuse was taking place during?
At this time, we do not.
You said ongoing, so you're saying it is more than just the incidents that occurred this night, Friday of last week?
That's correct.
Does your department have any history with either member of the couple?
Not to my knowledge, we do not.
The death of the child is being ruled then accidental at this time, as noted in that felony murder charge.
It was not accidental.
So that's, I guess, I know, and I appreciate you trying to explain that charge to us. Help us understand why the word accidental is used there in this little explanation of why the felony murder charge is in place here. And I know you said it may be upgraded, but if you can explain for us what you guys know at this time or how you can explain the death at this time.
That's just how the code's worded
Okay.
in the Code of Virginia.
So when we say he is facing a murder charge,
He's facing a murder charge.
Okay.
The code just has that in the description of it. When someone's killed in the commission of another felony, then that's just the code section that's used initially to do that. The evidence is very clear that this was not an accidental.
Does Kayla Thomas have any other children?
No.
Do you know if she is pregnant at this time?
Yeah. Yes, she is. Well, we have been told that she's pregnant.
Has CPS ever been involved in either of the two of the couple? Have they?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you know if there have been any reports filed with Child Protective Services at all?
Not to my knowledge, but, I definitely would defer to CPS on that question.
So you said Thomas doesn't have another child, but Helen does?
That's correct.
Okay.
Do you believe that anyone else knew this was going on?
Our investigation at this point does not provide that information.
Do you know if any other people will be charged or just the couple at this point?
At this point, we have no information that others will be charged, but again, I will state that our investigation is ongoing, and our detective unit is the best of the best, and if there's other information there, it will be discovered by them and moved on.
Do you know if anyone else was in the home the night of Friday? Sorry if you already said that.
We don't believe so. I don't have information that there was others in the home.
There was another child present, but not another adult.
Do you have any idea the blunt force trauma to the head? You said it was not consistent with the fall. Do you have any other reason to believe how that happened?
Those will be specifics of the case that we will put before a judge or a jury. And when that information comes out, it's going to shock the community. It's a tragic event, and when I say brutal blunt force trauma, that's exactly what I mean.
Has your department ever worked a case quite like this one?
We have worked some very tough cases involving children, but this is one that is going to impact us greatly, and also this community. As I stated, you guys are from this area. You know what a phenomenal community this is. Violent crime rate is very low. And when we're impacted by something of such magnitude, it rocks your community. And our department has struggled this week because, again, we say, children are our most vulnerable citizen. And our job every day is to protect them. And when they cannot speak for themselves, that's our job. And we're absolutely going to do that.
Do you know if the charges will be upgraded against Kayla Thomas? Are you looking at that?
At this point, we do not believe that they will be, but again, our investigation will be ongoing through the weekend and the next week, and we'll continue to work with the Commonwealth Attorney.
You said that you aren't going to talk about what you know about the length of time these incidents might have occurred. Is it safe to say you're still looking into the history here?
That's correct. Our investigation will not stop until we finalize and end up in a trial setting.
Chief, was the Friday call made by Helen?
It was.
Will you have counselors on staff or some to help with the officers who were involved in this?
That's something that we always try to implement in any tragic situation. These officers that are responding, it's very difficult for them. So that's a great point. Mm-hmm. It's something that we try to focus on to provide support to our staff members who are involved.
This may be minutia, but I guess since they've been charged with production of child pornography, I guess would it be fair to say that was discovered on electronics found within their home?
We seized numerous electronics and through them. I won't speak deeply on that part of the investigation, but that is how we investigate those cases.
In terms of the charges Hellman is facing, the solicitation of a minor charge, would you be able to say if that is the child who died or another victim?
No, we can't comment on.
You're not going to comment? Okay. The charges related to child pornography to which Hellman is an accessory and Kayla Thomas has the upgraded charges, were they carrying these actions out together?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm definitely not going to discuss. Those are details of our investigation that will be brought before in the criminal trial. So we won't discuss those until we get to that point.
What's next for your department in this case?
Next for our department is to continue to work through the evidence. Obviously, there's evidence that will still come in. I mean, autopsy has been performed, but, it takes some time to get final results back. Once we do, our job is to work with the Commonwealth Attorney to make sure we build a rock-solid case to make absolute prosecution.
Do you know how long Hellman and Thomas had resided at this address?
I don't know at this point.
Do you have any reason to suspect that the child's biological father knew anything about what might have been going on in the home?
I don't think we have information at this time to answer that.
I believe you said this, but you do not believe at this time that there will be other arrests in this case? Just want to confirm that with you.
At this time, we do not.
Okay. Do you know what the custody situation was like of this child?
That custody was between
Kayla
and her.
The child's biological father had shared custody.
Shared custody. Do you know at which residence the child spent most of his time?
I do not.
You mentioned there was another minor involved in this case. Are they within the care of family members or at this time?
The second case has been referred to CPS, so any details for that, have to give the questions have to give them.
Is it safe to say this child spent significant amounts of time in this home where the incident occurred Friday? And he lived there?
I believe he did spend time there, yes.
Is there anything else that you want the public to know about this investigation and how you all are working through it and the details within?
Other than we're staffed with highly trained detectives who know their job very well, and they are trained to handle cases of this magnitude. And they are very proficient, and they're going to put a case together and work with the Commonwealth Attorney to make sure that justice is served for this young man. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to send out a digital copy of that release. And as always, I am your point of contact moving forward for this. So let me know if you have any other questions.
The legal process that followed would take nearly 2 years. For Stephen's father, those years were defined by waiting for answers, waiting for accountability, and hoping that somewhere within the legal system, justice for his son would eventually take shape. In March 2021, a jury heard the first phase of the case against Mackenzie Hellman. These charges focused on the evidence investigators had recovered from digital devices. The jury deliberated for just over 30 minutes. When they returned, the verdict was clear: guilty on every count. Their sentencing recommendation, 2 life sentences. But Hellman's case was not finished yet. On July 26, 2021, he appeared in court again and entered guilty pleas to the remaining charges against him. When the judge asked questions during the hearing, Hellman responded mostly with brief, one-word answers. In August 2021, the court handed down the final sentence: 2 life terms in prison, plus an additional 90 years. A sentence that ensured he would never walk free again. Then the court turned its attention to Kayla Thomas. Her defense did not deny what had happened. Instead, her attorney argued that she had been coerced and controlled, describing a relationship defined by fear and manipulation. According to the defense, Thomas believed she was protecting herself and her unborn child from Hellman's threats. The jury listened to the testimony, reviewed the evidence, and weighed the arguments presented by both sides. After deliberating for approximately 1 hour, they returned their verdict: guilty on all 4 counts. During the proceedings, Kayla addressed the court. "I am deeply, deeply remorseful for what happened," she said. "I would give anything to have my baby boy back." But remorse could not change what had already happened. The jury recommended 2 life sentences, plus an additional 10 years. On September 23, 2021, the judge formally imposed the sentence. Before announcing the final decision, he addressed the courtroom. In his words, this case was among the most disturbing he had seen in his entire career. Members of Stephen's family were given the opportunity to speak. His maternal grandmother, Melinda Chrisley, told the court she still struggled to understand how events had reached such a devastating point. His grandfather, whom Stephen affectionately called Paw Paw, spoke about the empty space his grandson had left behind. He said he thought about the boy every single day. Stephen's father also faced the reality that every parent dreads. Standing outside the courthouse afterward, he knew that no verdict, no sentence, and no decision from the legal system could give him what he had truly lost. Justice had been delivered in a courtroom, but his son was not coming home.
This is Commonwealth versus Mackenzie Kyle Hellman.
The court is of the opinion and finds that your plea has been made freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. I accept your plea of guilty.
With that, Mackenzie Hellman determined his own fate, admitting guilt in the murder of a 2-year-old Christiansburg boy.
Christiansburg police responded to a call of an unresponsive 2-year-old male.
That was in January 2019. The Commonwealth attorney said his story changed several times, once saying the child fell off the bed, another story about the child being pushed into a dresser. The baby boy ultimately had more than 24 blunt injuries to his body, bleeding around his brain and broken bones in his skull, according to the medical examiner.
Dr. Tharp would testify that if a fall of that kind could kill a child, then no children would survive childhood, and that no child who had a sibling would survive childhood if a push into a dresser would cause those type of injuries and death.
All of this follows horrific sexual abuse the 2-year-old faced. Hellman and his ex-girlfriend, Kayla Thomas, who was also that child's mother, were convicted for those crimes earlier this year. He didn't have much to say Monday as he replied to questions with a flippant and despondent tone.
Have you discussed the charges and their elements with your attorney?
Yep. Inside this courthouse today that a convicted murderer and child abuser learned his fate. Mackenzie Hellman will spend 2 life sentences plus 90 years behind bars per a judge's order. Even as the victim's family, a 2-year-old baby boy, gave very emotional testimony today, Mackenzie Hellman still seemed very despondent, just as despondent as he was during his jury trial.
Can you please answer me? We can't report a nod. Nope. You know, any reason why judgment should not now be pronounced against you? Nope.
Those who did care for 2-year-old Stephen Meek II's life were in the courtroom Tuesday.
He loved me. He loved his grandma. He loved his father. He loved his other grandma. He loved his aunts, uncles, cousins.
Together, they shifted the focus from the terrible things Hellman put him through to the beautiful baby boy he was.
Mickey Mouse was his favorite cartoon. I can't even bring myself to watch Mickey Mouse.
I'd do anything to have him back. I really would.
That picture right there, that's the one that I'm missing bad, Your Honor.
Hellman pled guilty to murder and child abuse. He was also convicted for the unthinkable sexual abuse he and his ex-girlfriend subjected the young boy to. She also happens to be the little boy's mother.
I hope that you get the punishment that you deserve and suffer just like we have the loss of this baby boy.
Christiansburg, a mother found guilty of sex crimes involving her biological son, will spend the rest of her life in prison. Kayla Thomas was sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison plus 10 years. WDBJ7 Sophia Borelli was in the courtroom for us. She shares what happened.
Today is a day that is justice for my little baby Stephen. Now he's here, and he's in heaven.
Family members of Stephen Meek II spoke in court about what an amazing little boy he was.
He just brightened up the room and everything when you would walk in, and he was just so precious.
That's getting to see him every other weekend, get in the floor and play with him, hear him talk, just miss everything about him.
Kayla Thomas, Stephen Meek II's biological mother, was sentenced in Montgomery County Court on Thursday. She was found guilty of sex crimes involving her son, including forcible sodomy and others relating to child pornography.
It's very hard to deal with, still to this day, just trying to figure how something like that could happen, why it would happen.
My body just and mind went numb because I cannot wrap my head around of what she's done because she was not raised like that.
Stephen Meek II died in 2019 from brutal blunt force trauma.
She was supposed to protect that baby.
Before the judge made his final decision, Thomas spoke.
I am deeply, deeply remorseful for what happened. I'd give anything to have my baby boy back.
After that, the judge sentenced Thomas to 2 life sentences plus 10 years for her crimes.
I just cannot wrap my head around what my daughter done. Yes, she's my daughter, and I do love her, but I do not like the actions or love the actions that she done to this innocent baby.
In the months and years that followed, many people expected Stephen Sr. to retreat from the public eye. Grief of that magnitude often pushes people into silence. But he chose a different path. Instead of disappearing, he spoke openly about his son, about the child he had loved, and the life that had been taken away. He talked about Stephen not only as a victim, but as a real little boy. A boy who laughed easily, who carried his Mickey Mouse toy everywhere he went, who carefully studied every page of a picture book before asking someone to read it. A child whose life lasted less than 3 years, yet left an impact far larger than anyone could have imagined. Stephen's family also began advocating for changes in how similar cases are handled. Discussions surrounding Stephen's death contributed to broader conversations in Virginia about child safety within shared custody arrangements, particularly in situations where new adults enter a child's home environment. The case also prompted attention toward improving communication between law enforcement and child protective services when potential risk factors appear. Those changes cannot undo what happened. Nothing can. But they mean that Stephen's story did not simply disappear into silence. In some way, it continues to protect other children. Stephen Dale Meek II was born on July 14, 2016. He loved Mickey Mouse. He loved picture books. He loved morning walks and the bedtime stories his father read to him every night. He had the habit of offering his toys to other children, even ones he had never met, simply because sharing felt natural to him. He was supposed to grow up. He was supposed to experience school, friendships, love, and the thousands of ordinary days that form a lifetime. Those days never came, but there is something that remains within the power of everyone who hears his story. When a child suddenly becomes withdrawn, when they appear anxious, quiet, or fearful about going home, those changes should never be ignored. Teachers, doctors, neighbors, relatives, anyone may become the person who notices that something is wrong. Sometimes speaking up feels uncomfortable. Sometimes people worry they might be mistaken. But being wrong carries far less weight than remaining silent when a child might be in danger. Stephen's life may have been short, but he is remembered for the warmth he brought into the world. The little boy with the Mickey Mouse toy. The child whose laughter filled a room. The boy who made people smile simply by being there. And remembering him means remembering what every child deserves: a safe home, a protected childhood, and the chance to grow up.